What's up, everybody? Hope everybody is having a fantastic Veterans Day holiday, and our initially want to start the show off with some gratitude to all the servicemen, servicewomen who are and or have served in all kinds of different capacities. We appreciate you on this Veterans Day. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. And I'm Anthony. He is John. John, how are you, bud? You doing good?
I'm doing good. I'm the grandson of two vets on two opposite fronts of World War II. One of them was a tank commander in France. Another one was on a battleship in the Pacific. So,
wow,
my grandfathers.
Yeah, those are two badass dudes right there. So, appreciate everyone on this Veterans Day. But we are here and we have a jam-packed show that we are going to try and get a lot of different stuff, both news, opinions, analysis, and otherwise in about an hour. We always try and keep the show between 45 minutes and an hour, so it's palatable for you all. Plus, I know my guy John's been busy today and will be busy later this week as well. So I'm not busy. I don't do anything. I'm a loser.
That's not true.
Regardless. Regardless, again, this is the Believe in Cincy podcast channel, the Orange and Black Insider, and we are presented by FOCO, the fans only company, and of course, America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. We appreciate them being partners with the Believe Podcast Network and our show, our specific channel. Much love to FanDuel and their support. John, there was a tiny bit of news this week. Now, we'll just drop it. I think everybody knows by now because it's regarding the team star player and his health and all of that. Joe Burrow returned to practice on Monday and was out there. It was kind of one of those, oh, okay. There were differing timelines. Some people had said early on, maybe you start seeing some things around November. The last, I think it was the Bears game, and even the week prior, you kind of saw Burrow more on the field a little bit and on the sidelines a little bit more, as opposed to weeks prior. Has obviously hit his rehab very, very hard. I guess I was just way too cynical because I wish I pulled up some of the clips here, but there were times where I said, I'm just not expecting him back this year. And here we are 2 months after he sustained the injury, not 3, but 2 months. And he has returned to practice. They're saying maybe Thanksgiving night against the Ravens. And that's what he's talking about is maybe a goal here. They removed him off of IR. Obviously, that's why he's practicing, etc. Though, but were you surprised at how early this news came? I know I was, but or were we just kind of in the dark about severity or all of the things surrounding this?
Oh, we were completely in the dark. I think reporting on injuries is never going to be a perfect thing. It's honestly just one of the many faults of our industry because every injury, every recovery, every surgery is different and unique to
Yep.
all these players.
Yep.
And it just seemed like very concrete information though that this was a grade 3 turf toe injury, a very complicated injury on the surface, and the average recovery timeline at best is 3 months. So from the time this surgery was on September 19th, you're looking at late December as like the earliest that he could come back if everything went well. And I know that initially it was like they weren't sure how bad the injury was. Maybe this is a couple weeks, and then the more they found out, they obviously sought out a specialist for this kind of stuff, and then they learned about how bad it was, and that's what was reported. But clearly, inside the walls of Paycor Stadium with the training staff and everything like that, they kind of knew that this was going to be potentially a 2-month type situation. And all of a sudden, yeah, like it completely caught everybody off by guard. And I think that's why things have been so not chaotic, but there's been a wide range of reactions and opinions since he's come back to practice on November 10th. And it should be, I think we should probably do our due diligence here to just explain what it means that he is practicing now again. Joe Burrow is still on injured reserve as of right now. What the Bengals did is that they cleared him to practice starting this week.
That's
which
right.
Means
Yeah.
that there's a 21-day window in which he can
There you
practice
go.
the team without counting up against the roster. He does not have to play within those 21 days in order to play for the rest of the season. He just has to be activated to the team itself within those 21 days in order to actually play sometime this year. And Anthony, he said, I think at least 7 times in his first press conference, we'll see. We'll see, and I'll feel how it is. And I think that was very wise of him, obviously, because he's throwing, he's going through very light drills. It's not like the wrist. It's not like other types of ligaments that he's dealt with. It's a different kind of injury, but it's still, you put in more and more work and you move around and you have to see how it responds. You have to see how it feels. You have to see if you can still, do the things that you need to do in order to play at your best. And I think that's the first variable here is that now that he's starting to ramp up things, they're going to see how these next 2 weeks go in terms of his workload and how he feels. And if it's even, again, just in this first variable, if he's healthy enough to actually play, because I don't think that they know that for certain. They just know that he's good enough to at least start practicing and give this a chance. And he's at least reached a stage in which they feel comfortable getting to this step.
So this thought just hit me like a thunderbolt right now. This is, if you accumulate the major ligament injuries that Burrow has suffered, it's and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I misspoke about the IR thing. Right wrist, right? Throwing wrist. Mm-hmm. This was the left big toe, correct? Or was it the right big toe?
I feel ashamed that I don't know that.
Well, it was knee, years ago, right? It was the left knee.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just thinking about the mechanics, and this is totally off the wall thinking here, but the mechanics of all of those accumulated injuries. And granted, he came through last year and played, his best statistical season he's ever played with that, throwing wrist issue. But you just mechanics wise, and when he comes back, I mean, that's a plant toe, regardless of what foot it is. We can double check on that. You've got the left knee. That's a step, that's your stepping leg. And you do obviously push off of that. And then you got the wrist. I believe in Joe Burrow, but those are all things that take a toll potentially on mechanics, power, and maybe not permanently, because he played exception last year. But when you kind of couple all of those things together and you think in your mind's eye about quarterback mechanics, it's a lot to kind of adjust and feel through. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that. I'm kind of thinking out loud as I look at these accumulated ligament injuries.
Yeah, so it was his left toe. So for a right-handed quarterback, that
same leg.
Yeah, like your front foot there. And he was actually asked about the mechanics aspect of it, I think by Jeff Hobson, and he said he wasn't necessarily worried about that. because not as much pressure and weight is being placed on that toe as you may think, because obviously your drive foot is your back foot there, and that's where maybe more of the pressure is. It's not necessarily about throwing, but it's just about movement ability, escapability. Obviously, the biggest thing that separates him from the quarterback who's in there right now, and Joe Flacco, who's more or less a statue. That's going to be the thing that is going to determine if he's actually good to go and if he's actually able to withstand all this stuff. And obviously, the injury itself was very much of a one in a million type chance of just being stuck in the turf like that. But it has healed obviously enough to the point where he's able to throw, and it didn't seem like anything was necessarily like if he was in pain. Like obviously, you wouldn't be able to tell necessarily, but I think mechanics wise, it is going to be okay, but it is obviously an interesting footnote that it is the same leg, obviously that's been going through all this. And God, even when he said like he was describing the differences between like obviously the calf is a muscle and obviously this is a ligament, and he said like I've been through all the ligament injuries, and like God damn, he's right. It sucks, but he's right. It's just it's unfortunate.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not on the back plant leg that those other lower leg injuries have occurred, but it's that follow through step and follow through leg. So it's an interesting, it's just an interesting dynamic. I just was kind of thinking about that, but obviously the other thing that came to light, and maybe this is also temporary until things are really, really feeling good, is he's got some sort of apparatus in his cleat to not only protect that toe, but obviously just make sure it's stable and make sure nobody God forbid is stepping on it or anything like that. So that that there's another potential, I guess, comfort issue that isn't really dealing with the injury, but it's it's kind of like when you see guys, quarterbacks or otherwise, that used to wear those rib flak jacket things, right? And it's like, okay, how much is that going to hinder your speed? How much is that going to hinder your catch radius if you're a receiver, that sort of thing? And of course, pain management, because if you've got a rib injury, anytime you breathe, anyone who suffered a rib injury, broken or otherwise, anytime you freaking breathe or lean on it or anything, I mean, it hurts. So that's another dynamic to this whole thing. Whether that's still in there if and when he plays is yet to be seen. But for now, it appears that that's part of this whole coming back process.
Yeah, the apparatus, interestingly enough, not in a good way, Brock Purdy re-aggravated his turf toe injury while he was wearing one as well. So it's obviously not a foolproof type situation, but obviously the more precautions that you take, the better. But it just kind of speaks to it's just another unique and unpredictable type of injury that you not only suffer, but you recover from, and then you come back and play with. And you never really know how it's going to go when you're able to play. But obviously, I think, again, like he said all the right things in terms of not putting the cart before the horse. And obviously, I would imagine he has an idea of when he wants to play. But I think what fans need to realize right now is that, yes, he's cleared to practice. And yes, there is obvious hope that he can play, but so much is still up in the air. And obviously, they're working up against the clock here because it's the literal middle of the season.
It is the middle-ish of the season, and time is evaporating quickly. This conference is weird. This division is weird. We'll talk about that in just a little bit as well. Normally at 3-6, you're like, boy, I don't know that you got a shot. But again, we'll talk about it in a little bit. There are some interesting dynamics at play with the team, the conference, the division, wherein they are still theoretically alive in this last stretch. Has a lot of games that will determine a lot of things within the AFC North. More on that in just a little bit. But what kind of, because this is where I waver a little bit, what kind of shot in the arm do you think this is for the team as a whole? Because Flacco's playing well, right? I mean, Flacco is playing very, very well. I don't think I'm going on a limb saying probably pretty well beyond expectations from fans to this point, at least statistically speaking. So, I mean, when you have your guy back and he's your franchise guy and he's your leader and all of that kind of stuff, but it's not like where it was towards the beginning of the season, right after this injury occurred, where the quarterback was the one that was largely costing you games. That's not the case right now. So I guess how big of a shot in the arm just seeing him back at practice do you think that is for the rest of the team?
I think it's outside of like Trey Hendrickson coming back, it's like all they have in terms of what can galvanize the team to play better than they have.
Yeah.
Because clearly the head coach is not capable of providing that spark, and if he was, then I think we would have seen something different by now. And that's what kind of irks me a little bit about this whole thing, because the team is not good, and people have a right to feel very bleak about the state of the franchise and the state of the season. And then they post a video about him just walking through the revolving door of the indoor practice facility, and everyone is all like, "Oh my god, everything is safe," because that's the type of energy that the quarterback, the franchise quarterback, the face of the franchise, the person who makes this whole operation relevant, like he just drives everything. So they can just use him walking with a jersey as a way to be like, "Oh, don't give up on the season yet. Number 9 is coming back." Obviously, he doesn't play defense. Obviously, the production at quarterback right now is not the problem with the team. But I think in terms of where the team is right now, the fact that the coaches feel a lot of pressure, the personnel department feels a lot of pressure, ownership feels pressure with the way that the season is going. They can rely on the fact that people love the quarterback, the players love the quarterback, the fans love the quarterback, the media loves the quarterback, as a way of being like, yes, we're bad, but this is the reason why you should still be invested in the season and not just throw in the towel and allow opposing fans to fill up the stadium and allow something that probably should happen at the end of the season in terms of things blowing up in at least to some degree. It does feel a little bit, I'm very cynical about this, but it does feel like that a little bit, where it's like, yes, the season feels kind of lost, but hey, the quarterback can come back, and it's just like, yeah, I guess. But I would imagine for a coaching staff that is desperate for anything to light a spark under this team, seeing the face of the franchise and the guy that everyone falls behind starting to practice again, I would imagine that in their mind, that could definitely help.
Yeah, I guess it's more of, yeah, that's a good point. It's like a psyche healer a little bit, right? Like where in a year where you've seen all kinds of different crazy stuff, a franchise that we all know has seen all kinds of different stuff, 2 inexplicable losses back to back where you go, what the hell is going on here? I guess him just being there and showing some form of solid recovery or ahead of schedule, that sort of thing. I guess it could, in a way, yeah, he doesn't play defense, but it could, in a way, kind of say, hey, okay, now things, okay, the boat's not rocking so much right now, like, even though he's not probably playing this week or, whenever he gets back on the field, there's a sense of normalcy with him being back out there on the practice field. And I guess that's where I can say, maybe that's a galvanizer of this team, even if we may not see him for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, who knows? But I think it's important because of that. I think it's important to go and talk about the expectations for this team, the expectations for each quarterback. Right now, it's Joe Flacco. And Joe Flacco has done everything in his power, played arguably the best stretch of football, statistically speaking, in his career, like over a month span. He has done everything in his power to get this team to be, what should have been like 3-1, right? And so had the Bengals been 3-1, we're having a completely different podcast. We're having a completely different conversation right now. But there are a lot of different avenues to take what we're going to talk about here. It's not only, okay, can Joe Flacco still produce at what he's doing, even if it is for only a game, 2 games, 3 more games this season? It's also, what should we expect from Joe Burrow, talking about the mechanics and the ligaments affected from, various injuries that he's accumulated. But it's also, kicking the can down the road a little bit. Like, what is the defensive expectations, not only with Flacco, but with Burrow in the lineup? What's the run game expectations? There are a lot of different things to look at here, because the run game, there's no doubt, has also gotten a boost with Flacco under center that it didn't see with Burrow under center in those first 2 games. So there's a lot to dissect here in terms of what we should expect from each guy and each offense if and when 2 different quarterbacks take snaps the rest of the way.
I do want to talk about the run game, but I think where my mind goes first is Flacco's the quarterback not just for this week, but he's the quarterback for next week. I just don't think that Burrow is coming back for the Patriots game. I think the earliest that he can come back is that Ravens game on Thursday night. Even that may be a stretch because it is on a short week. But clearly, he said it to Jake Laser, apparently, that Thanksgiving-ish is when he wants to come back by. He very much hinted at his press conference that it would mean a lot for him, very much so, to come back for that game in which they haven't had a lot of success at Baltimore recently. Flacco's the guy for the next 2 weeks. And if the next 2 weeks goes similar to the last 2 weeks, you're 3-8, and any chance of winning the division is basically just kaput at that point. And that's probably your best chance of going to the playoffs. 9-8, winning out the rest of the way, I don't know if that even gives you a shot at the 7th seed in the wild card, just because the AFC is just not very good this year. Maybe that's the case. But if they go 0-2 next 2 weeks, that's the scenario in which it doesn't matter how good Burrow feels. It's probably not worth risking putting him out there against Baltimore in that third game of this 5-game stretch that they have. So that right away is where my mind is. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but like that's initially, like, in terms of looking at this from like a micro perspective, like you look at the next 2 weeks, Flacco's the guy. And that's the other variable in terms of Joe Burrow seeing. He needs to see what the team is and if it's even worth actually just going out there. And if not, like, it doesn't matter how he feels, like it may not just be worth it.
I wonder who has the most say in that. Is that Burrow? Is that the coaching staff? Is that ownership? That sort of thing. But John, you and I have followed this team for a long time. I think that if the Bengals do stumble to 3-8, 4-7, whatever the case may be, there is a world that exists that the Bengals will want Burrow out there to try and win as many games and generate towards the end of the year and generate as much excitement as they possibly can to negate bad PR, to negate potential bad ticket sales next year, all of that, to say, hey, look, our quarterback wasn't here. And we made a move and that guy was productive. Yeah, we've seen how they narrate an upcoming season, right? We've seen how a certain finish to a season, a strong finish to what is it called? The jungle bounce, or what is that?
Dead cat bounce.
Dead cat bounce. Thank you. We've seen how they've utilized that as a narrative to fuel excitement for the upcoming season. And so I'm with you. If the Bengals are by most or all intents and purposes out of the playoff race, I don't think they should rush Burrow back out there to try and win, get a 5 or 6 win season and say, see, we won 3 of the last 4 and that sort of thing. I don't think that's what that should be about. You could also do Flacco a solid in the process and say, he's auditioning for a job next year, all of that kind of stuff too. But obviously that's not your main focus as an organization. You want to win games, but I'm with you though about if the Bengals just can't scrape together the wins over the next 2-3 weeks, I don't really see a purpose in Burrow being dragged out there earlier than probably what all of us would think he should be suiting up for.
Right. And then again, like that's the scenario in which they go 0-2, and we need to continue looking at the next 2 weeks as Flacco's world, and that's just what it is. If they go 1-1, right? Say they sweep the Steelers, and then they lose to the Patriots, who are clearly a better team than them. That puts them at 4-7, but they have another win in the division. That does, I think, keep the door open for Burrow to come back. And if he does come back, Anthony, like you said, there are differences in what this offense can do well right now with Flacco compared to with Burrow. But I feel like we just haven't really talked about this at all. This is the first time that Burrow has had surgery and came back in the middle of the season. And when we talk about how the offense produces differently and does different things with him on and off the field, to see that change happen in real time in the middle of the season without an off season separating that is a completely new variable that I'm extremely intrigued at seeing, to see if they put him under center a little bit more, if that's even wise to do in terms of like putting more stress on his foot and instead of just keeping him in shotgun so he doesn't have to move around as much. But the way that the run game has responded to an under center presence, and the fact that defenses have to respect Flacco throwing the ball from under center because he's more adept at that compared to Burrow, and that's just one of the the few things that he does better than him at the stage in their careers. That is extremely interesting to me. And if Burrow comes back and they have him somewhat limited in terms of mobility, if that impacts the offense in a negative way, despite the fact that obviously you trust Burrow's accuracy in his decision making, like that is an extremely interesting way for me to feel, I guess, still intrigued about the season. But it is a completely new and different task for Zach Taylor and the architects of this offense to not only change the offense once with Jake Browning, but then twice with Joe Flacco, and then the third time with Joe Burrow coming back. And it's just like it's never been done before, at least with Burrow's injury history. So that completely opens up the expectations about what to expect from this offense going forward, because I don't know if you can go back to expecting Burrow to be Superman, even if he's able enough to play, at least early on in the first couple of games that he comes back.
Do you remember in 2009 when Carson Palmer hurt his, I can't remember if it was a thumb or a wrist? It was something, but remember he had did that weird handoff thing? And the Bengals at that point too, and granted this wasn't a surgery situation and all that kind of stuff, but the Bengals at that point too really decided to, and credit to Cedric Benson at the time, because he was playing pretty well over those next handful of seasons, but they kind of made it to they made it a scenario wherein they tried to kind of protect Palmer a little bit to not take hits and do different things, be a little more run heavy. That was the old Dennis Rowland tackle eligible stuff that they ran a bunch. And so they did a lot of that in an effort to protect Palmer. I don't know that they will try to do that, because that's really not who, that's not who this team has been under Burrow. But I mean, at some point you got to alleviate, if you are going to rush him back out there, you got to alleviate the hits. You got to be able to still recreate that semblance of balance that we've seen under Flacco. And like you, that's whether or not the Bengals are still competitive and vying for a playoff spot. That to me is where I go, okay, are you going to be able to still run the ball effectively with multiple backs like the Bengals have done with Flacco? And that hasn't always been the case with Burrow under center.
No, it hasn't. And yeah, like I think it does ultimately come down to, if you're going to play Burrow, you need to make sure that he's able to do everything that he's accustomed to doing. I don't know if it's worth, not the risk of re-injuring, but like the risk of like what the offense is at this point. Obviously another injury as well, but like if you can't have Burrow be his normal superhuman self in terms of extending plays and creating out of structure because of the toe, then I don't know if it's worth having him out there compared to Flacco when the offense is playing like this. And again, I don't want to be caught in 4K saying that Joe Flacco is a better quarterback than Joe Burrow. It's not what I'm saying at all. That's not what anyone's saying. But the production at the quarterback spot and the efficiency of the offense is in a place where it is sustainable. And if you pair that with a defense that is at least a little bit competent, you might be able to get some wins, but that hasn't been the case yet. And obviously Burrow's presence doesn't impact what the defense does necessarily. I guess they can try a little bit more if they like Burrow better than Flacco, but that shouldn't be the case either. So yeah, we're just in the spot where they need to see how Burrow's toe responds over the next couple of weeks. And then they need to make the decision if he's 100% healthy and they're in this, then full speed ahead.
So to kind of wrap a bow on this, we've got a month's worth of a sample size of Flacco in this system. We're talking about expectations, not only with potentially Burrow coming back into the lineup, but Flacco maintaining it at least for the foreseeable future. He's been on a tear this month. He's been a streaky quarterback in his career. Obviously, we've talked about the weapons that he has at his disposal here as opposed to past teams he was on. Let's just say it's another 2 games. Do you expect a similar statistic? Do you think it's just going to stay where it's been at this high level? Do you think it's going to be a little bit more towards what we saw against the Packers? Do you think it's somewhere in between? I mean, what are your expectations for Flacco, even if it is for 2 more games here?
Well, the volume that he's had in the past 2 weeks is mainly because it had to be that way because of the defense, falling on its face constantly, right? The efficiency and like the neutral situations, I think, is still good. It just may not be 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like the decision making is still there. The accuracy is still there. I think, Maisha brings up a good point about his shoulder. Like he's still dealing with an injury himself, like the AC joint sprain. Yep. And it helps that obviously he had a week off to kind of rest that, and he had to play through that against Chicago. Clearly it didn't look like it affected him that much. And especially because the game went kind of long and he was still able to throw the ball pretty well. So I don't think it's going to be as good as it has been, but it still should still be in a place where, yeah, you can still rely on the offense to put up points on the board. It may just not be enough that they need if this defense continues to be the worst in the league.
Ugh. Yeah, I'm really,
Second worst.
really
The
curious.
Commanders are technically the worst now, so yay for them.
Yeah, and they also have been struggling without their starting quarterback, not as long as Burrow's been out, but they've been misfortunate in their own regard with losing Jaden Daniels to a couple of different things. Most recently, a dislocated elbow, right? So, yeah, but that's important to think about. And it's not only just statistical production. Can Flacco still do enough to finally overcome that offense and turn some of those 1.2 2-point losses into a 2-point win, like we saw a couple weeks ago against the Steelers? And oh, by the way, the Bengals play them this week as well in Pittsburgh, and we'll preview that game in just a little bit too. But John, in looking at FanDuel, the Bengals currently, as of Tuesday evening, are 5.5-point underdogs, it looks like. And the over-under is set at 49.5 points. I don't know how I initially feel about the line, but the over-under, with how many points the Bengals have been scoring, I guess they also look at how little that the Steelers scored on Sunday night, maybe, and that's playing into it. But how much the Bengals are not only scoring but giving up. 49.5 over under seems a little low, doesn't it?
It seems low. And if you're going to say that, and I'm not saying that you're saying this, but if the books are saying that they don't trust the Steelers offense because they weren't able to score points against a pretty competent defense in the Chargers, they fail to realize that if you have a struggling offense, the best remedy for that struggle is to play the Bengals defense, which is what the Jets and the Bears each found out over the past couple of weeks. So yes, this is virtually the same Steelers offense that put up 31 points on the road on a short week just 3 weeks ago, right? I don't imagine that the Steelers are going to score just 10 points again unless the Bengals defense finds some sort of magical amulet and they get powers from outer space to play a lot better. I would imagine the Steelers are going to put up some points in this game just because of the nature of the bounce back. And as much as I dislike the man, Aaron Rodgers typically doesn't put up consecutive stinkers. And I think he's been at least decent enough to warrant him coming back to have a decent performance. And against this Bengals defense that already doesn't rush the passer well, he gets the ball up pretty quickly. That neutralizes things anyways. He didn't have any problem throwing the ball against this Bengals defense a couple of weeks ago, and I don't imagine it's going to be that much of a difference now. And I don't think the Steelers defense on the other side of the ball has really done anything noteworthy in the past couple weeks to indicate that they're going to be able to stop Jamar Chase and T. Higgins at an effective rate. I don't think it's going to be Jamar Chase getting 25 targets again necessarily, but again, 49 for the total seems a little bit low compared to what this Bengals defense is accustomed to giving up.
Good take here by Dan the Man, also saying losing Pirine, who went out last week with a sprained ankle, I think. It was on that hip drop type tackle. Mm-hmm. And looks like he will be out. Maybe, obviously, the bye helps him heal up a little bit, but we may not see him until end of this month or potentially even December. And he was very effective. So Taj Brooks and a lot of Chase Brown, I think, is what's happening going forward, and we'll see how that works out for them. But yeah, the Bengals are 5.5-point underdogs. They were. Was it the Jets game they were 5.5-point favorites, or the Bears game that they were 5.5 point? And
they were underdogs against the Bears, but they were favorites against the Jets. Yes.
Yeah. And it was like anyway. So, that being said, kind of talking Steelers, we want to talk about some other things with the division too, but we'll do kind of a mini preview. I know it's a few days away here, but we'll do a little bit of a mini preview. But again, thanks to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, for being a presenting sponsor. Of course, gamble responsibly and only in states where applicable. And we want to thank FOCO, Fans Only Company. Both of the links to both of our presenting sponsors are in the show description for in the YouTube channel, as well as will be in the audio description too when that drops. And of course, you can get this show, the Orange and Black Insider, part of the Believe in Cincy, BLEAV in CINCY podcast channel, along with a slate of other great shows through your favorite audio streamer. And our thanks to the Believe Podcast Network for bringing us on board as well. But John, let's get to the Steelers a little bit, because we just talked about them. And from the Steelers side of the fence, you could say, oh, well, the Bengals pulled a rabbit out of the hat last week and still lost at home to the Bears, onside kick and flurry of points and all that kind of stuff. But the Bengals side could look at Sunday night and say they suffered a safety, a quarterback sack, safety. They had a muff punt that was recovered. I mean, they had errors on each side of the ball, and they could not score. Granted, the Chargers came out pretty tenacious, and that's, they're a pretty solid team. But I saw a Steelers team last week. Like you said, I think they do have a very good ability to bounce back from embarrassing losses or poor performances, that sort of thing, which this was both. When I was watching this game, this was very uncharacteristic Mike Tomlin Steelers football to me. Just a lot of errors on each phase of the game. And so I wouldn't discount them bouncing back, but this team looked like one that was in all kinds of trouble, at least for 1 week.
Yeah, 100%. And you never really know when the Steelers hit that wall, but it's typically inevitable. And they still somehow manage to put up enough wins. But if you want to talk about a team that is undisciplined and makes unforced errors and everything like that, very rarely are the Steelers the team that's more prominent with them compared to the opponent. And right now, like, if you want to talk about this matchup, like, the Bengals should not be favored to make fewer mistakes compared to anybody at this point. And like that's just like independent of what the Steelers did against a whole other team. It is a new week, and I think the Steelers feel a little bit of pressure with the Ravens kind of coming up behind them. Now just one game back, and yeah, like it's tough to imagine, as flawed as the Steelers are, for them to have that cruddy of a game again, considering all the pieces are still there. And it was definitely eye-opening, though, and there's definitely ways that you can. And the Bengals obviously beat this team and did it in ways that were just like, we're going to beat you in a certain way, and there's nothing you can do to stop it, right? And it's very rare to see the Steelers kind of submit to that. But that happened, and I think the more film that's out there right now with who they are, and the fact that the pass rush for the Steelers was kind of an issue against the Bengals this last time, and that's a credit to the Bengals offensive line. That's another thing that you would hope, kind of continues. And if that's the case, the Bengals offense has another shot to put up a lot of points in this team again.
And Pittsburgh, uncharacteristically, is searching for all kinds of answers on defense. And last week wasn't an offensive fireworks show by the Chargers, but I mean, they let go of Juan Thornhill, one of the guys that they brought in and that they thought would help them. They were playing Jalen Ramsey at safety the other night and trying to move him around to give him favorable matchups. They are struggling on that side of the ball. And now a guy who has done traditionally well against them, and Joe Flacco, faces them again. And you brought up film, John. This is the fascinating aspect to me in this game, because I'm sure for a while now, I know it's week to week and you focus on your opponent, but I'm sure, a couple of weeks or so before the Bengals first played them, the Steelers were expecting one style of offense, one quarterback, that sort of thing. And then now they get Joe Flacco in a different offense, and maybe they were not fully prepared. I don't know. Now they have faced that offense, and they will be, in all likelihood, facing them again, this Flacco-led offense. And so you have that on film, but then you also have the experience of Flacco and the ability to score points that they displayed against the Steelers just a couple of weeks ago. So I guess I'm just thinking, who who gets the favor, who gets the more out of film review this week, you would hope it's the Bengals with the bye week, right? I mean, you would hope that they just, with that extra time, extra preparation, all that kind of stuff, you would hope it's them. But just the dynamics of how the season has gone for the Cincinnati Bengals, quarterbacks in and out of the lineup, all that kind of stuff. I'm curious to see how the Steelers potentially rebound, and if there are some things they can exploit that may or may not be predictable, or they may or may not have learned from the matchup just a few weeks ago.
It's a good point, and I think you're dealing with just two defenses that can't do a lot of different things schematically because of the limitations of their personnel, or the fact that they design these defenses to do certain things and those certain things just aren't working necessarily. Obviously, going back to the Dick LeBeau days, he was obviously the inventor of the zone blitz, and it was effective with what they had, and it's why they were able to generate consistent pressure. But now that they're addicted to man coverage, if they can't get home in time, and you have a quarterback with great wide receivers who can get open, and there's a lot of chemistry and trust that's being developed there, it's how you can neutralize that. And so that's the problem with the Steelers defense right now, is that they have a phenomenal defensive line, but it's being rendered useless because their secondary can't hold up with what the coverage is that they want to deploy. And the Bengals offense is designed to beat man coverage, right? So that is an advantage for the Bengals. And despite the film that the Steelers may have on them and their offense, it hasn't really changed much since that game since that game back in week 7. So that's something that I think is still just going to favor the Bengals, just because the personnel is better. Just like the Steelers offense might be bad and they may not have any weapons outside of DK Metcalf, but the Bengals defense is worse. And it's just like, if there's any defense where the Steelers can take advantage of and put up some points, it's going to be this one, right? So it's just like, the horses on either side just aren't necessarily there, but they're there in other areas, right? And that's why there will be points in this game naturally, unless both quarterbacks, I think, just all of a sudden just hit the wall in terms of father time, which I don't think we really expect, but it could happen, right? So this could either be a completely ugly game in which it's like 13-10, or it could be another game in the 30s. I feel like there's no way that's going to be in between.
Oddly enough, the Bengals, and you kind of hinted at it a little bit, oddly enough, the Bengals offensive line did a pretty good job against the Steelers defensive front, and Cam Hayward has given them fits for years, as has TJ Watt. Highsmith is a weapon as well, and the Bengals did a pretty good job last time these two teams faced off. Highsmith had a couple of plays against the Chargers, but other than that, it wasn't a ton of splashy plays from the defensive line. The Chargers were able to kind of negate that. And like you said, maybe that is, the play of the secondary and back end of the defense from the Steelers that contributes to that. But to your point, this hurting defense that we all had hoped will learn whatever over the bye, they will expectedly be without Trey Hendrickson. The last time these two faced off, the Bengals didn't have Trey Hendrickson then either, but the Bengals couldn't muster any pass rush in that game. So now, as Al Golden and that defense takes the field again here, they have to figure out a way to get Aaron Rodgers to the ground, or force more errant throws, bad throws, to create a couple of turnovers, because they've been totally famined out of those the last couple of weeks, which obviously have led to a couple of losses. So it's, Trey Hendrickson is doubtful, I believe, this week as of the injury report, but they're going to need to figure out something, and it's going to, I don't know what it's going to be, but they need to figure out something to get to Aaron Rodgers.
I did notice that when Rodgers threw the interception, it was like an in-breaking route, and he just kind of sailed it, and I believe like a rookie safety picked it off. Like Collinsworth went on like a whole thing about like, oh, like this guy, like he never throws interceptions. He's made a career off of eliminating mistakes. And of course, Rodgers threw 2 interceptions against the Bengals in week 7. It was a phenomenal play made by DJ Turner, one of the best interceptions you'll ever see. Jordan Battle decided to find the ball that one time, and he picked it off on a deep pass. And that was ultimately, you could say, the difference of the game. It's the difference as to why that defense was enough to win that game, as opposed to the other two, when they didn't create any turnovers against the Jets and the Bears. They had 2 turnovers, and they still gave up 31 points. If they don't turn the ball over, the Steelers don't turn the ball over on those 2 possessions, who's to say they don't also score 40 points in that game? So you're talking about 3 consecutive games in which they give up 39 plus points and no turnovers and all the other bad things that the defense has been accustomed to giving up. So turnovers have been the difference into why the Bengals have won 3 games this year. It was the Browns in week 1. It was Dax Hill's turnover in week 2, the turnover on Dallas against the Jags, and the 2 interceptions by Aaron Rodgers in week 7. If the defense can find a way to find the ball and luck the way into turnovers, that has been the difference in terms of winning and losing for them.
And Flacco needs to continue to take care of the ball on his end too. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you look at, okay, they beat the Steelers by 2, right? They lost to the Jets by 1, and then they lost to the Bears on that it's by 5, but on that final possession. If you can get, that's their way of getting stops at this point. If you can, and not, allow a field goal attempt and 3 points or any of that stuff. If you can do that once or twice in a game and you're not giving the ball up, that's where those 1-point losses, that 1 possession loss turns into a 1 possession win for the Cincinnati Bengals. So unfortunately, I don't think Ryan Rico's been, opposing punters have been overly busy, but when they play the Bengals, that is, but they absolutely need to be positive in the turnover margin again this week. If it's going to be the allowance of yards, the allowance of touchdowns and points and all that kind of stuff, they absolutely need to be in the positive for the turnover margin in this game if they want to win. All the other things ring true. You got to keep TJ Watt at bay. You got to continue to find answers for Cam Hayward, and Flacco needs to play at a high level again, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it. But that is really the bottom line for the Bengals and their defense and the state of their defense right now. They have to create, if they're not getting off the field, they have to create even if it is like a punt of an interception, right? Like a deep ball and they're pinned back in their own territory where they do not allow a field goal attempt. They do not allow a long drive, that sort of thing. They have to create probably 2 a game at this point. If they, to average it out to win.
It's like the tackling's been so bad at this point, just go for the ball. If you're going to miss anyways, just, do what you can. Yeah. Sad state of affairs.
It is. But big game against the Steelers for the Bengals, for both teams, big game. Steelers are barely hanging on to the AFC North lead. As you mentioned, the Ravens are kind of slowly coming back to life. The Bengals are sort of in there, but these last 2 losses have really taken a toll in their playoff push. And regardless of who's at quarterback, the Bengals seem to have this sense of we're in it. We can win this game. And as I looked at the AFC North, John, aside from the Bengals having a 2-0 record, they've got what? Let's see, they're 3-6, so they've got 8 games left, right? 4 of them are against division opponents. I believe it's the Ravens who have 5 division games the rest of the way. Browns have another 4, I think, as well. So the NFL, whether this was intentional or not, this back half of the schedule for the AFC North is loaded with divisional games. They did not stack them early or in the middle of the season. They stacked them late. And I think in a way, that's why you kind of have this log jam a little bit in the AFC North and maybe even a little bit in the rest of the conference. But it sounds weird at 3-6. You're like, oh man, I mean, really, you should kind of be looking at April at this point, March for free agency. But really, in a way, as ridiculous as it may seem on the surface, the Bengals do have a pulse in this. But how realistic do you think it is that they can make a run in this AFC North, given where the standings are and the amount of division games that are left for each team in this final half of the season?
So The Athletic has a really cool model that you can basically just simulate 1,000 times, like how the season's going to end by picking games. Right now, the Bengals have less than a 1% chance of making the playoffs. And that's just by winning the division. If they go 2-0 these next 2 weeks and the Ravens lose the next 2 weeks and the Steelers lose in week 12 to the Bears, which is completely probable, the Bengals' chances of winning the division are 16%. And it's not good. And that's the best case scenario for the next 2 weeks in which Burrow is not out there. That's the Bengals are now, 5-6. The Ravens took a stumble. The Steelers are 0-2, and still there's a 80% chance that the Ravens probably win the division and the Bengals are left on the outside looking in. So yes, of course they're delusional for thinking that they have a chance of winning this. It's not impossible, and it's not a reason to give up as of November 11th with these games yet to be played, but they are in, I think, a much larger hole than they would venture to say by saying, oh, we're only 2 games back from a team that we beat 3 weeks ago with the same quarterback that we have right now. So yes, that the simple answer is yes, they are delusional, but of course the games aren't being played on computers and simulations. But that's just, I think I wanted to provide some context as to how unlikely this would actually be. And of course, that's only just looking into 2 weeks in the future. If you were to project even more games, percentage naturally would go up. But even if the best case scenario were to happen in the next 2 weeks, in which Burrow could come back after that, it's still a very, very tall climb to make.
They basically have to go at worst 6-2 the rest of the way. The Bengals do.
Yep.
Now let me give you some context because you mentioned 2 weeks. Let me give you and everybody. I'm sure you probably know this because you're a smart guy and you pay attention to things way more than I do. But the next 2 weeks for the Bengals are at Pittsburgh and then they host New England. Right? New England is doing really well.
Mm-hmm.
The next 2 weeks for the Baltimore Ravens. Would you like to take a guess at those games?
One of them is the Bengals, but what's the other one?
The Ravens, I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. So what are they?
The Raven. I'm going to make a bold proclamation that, and I'm not hot take guy, you know that, but by December 7th, it's very possible that the Ravens will have this division sewn up. The next 2 weeks for the Baltimore Ravens, they are at the Browns and they host the Jets.
Oh.
Then they host the Bengals on Thanksgiving night, and then they host the Steelers on December 7th. So by December 7th, that could be they could go 2-2, they could go 3-1, they can go 4-0, they could go 1-3. I don't know. They're not going winless in that stretch, but 2 division games, 2 home division games against the 2 teams that are right behind them in division. 3 division games in general, 2 of them at home, and another home game. They have 3 home games in a row at the Jets on the 23rd. Jets are at the Ravens on the 23rd. The Bengals are at the Ravens on the 27th, which is Thanksgiving night, and the Steelers are at the Ravens on December 7th. That's their month. At Browns, home for Jets, home for Bengals, home for Ravens through December 7th. The Steelers, by contrast, they host the Bengals, as we know, on Sunday. Then they go to Chicago. Then they host the Bills. And then, as I mentioned, they go to the Ravens. So there is a very good chance that if the Ravens are resurgent, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer and all that kind of stuff, there is a very good chance that by December 7th, the Ravens could start pulling away with things. But the Bengals also have a couple of critical games. This one in front of them, they have to do the 1 week at a time thing. Things looked bleak last year, John, and they made a run of it and almost made the playoffs. So stranger things have happened, but the way that this schedule has worked out for the Ravens at this point in time, again, I'm going to reiterate, at the Browns, home for the Jets, home for the Bengals, home for the Steelers. That's their next month of football.
Not good for the team in orange. I like that you brought up last year because that was like the conversation after, how terrible November was. Like if they run the table, they have a chance. And they ran the table, and everything happened up until the very last day, in which
1 game,
2 games.
Yep.
They needed 1 game to go their way, and they didn't make it. So ultimately, they didn't get in. And as much as it is possible for it to happen, it's just it is a case where everything needs to go right. And it's just like, it's why I know that we have to have these discussions, but it's just like, it feels like, what is the point of talking about it when you just run into the same scenario every single year? And when you're entering December thinking, if this goes right and this goes right and this goes right,
yep,
and then 80 to 90% of the things go right, and then you feel somewhat decent about it, enough to the point where nothing happens in January, nothing that needs to happen in January. And it's just like, how many times can we continue to circle the wagons with this? Like how many times can we have the same conversation in which what is even the point? It's just like it sucks saying that, but it's just like it doesn't help this program by me saying that, but it's just like what's the point? How do you find yourself in this situation every single year?
Well, this also goes back this also goes back to our conversation about expectations for quarterbacks too, because this is a notoriously slow, whether it's Zach Taylor, the offense, Joe Burrow, the guy, injuries, all kinds of stuff. This is a notoriously slow starting team that catches fire in maybe late October, but usually November, December. Well, now you are only in Joe Burrow. Whenever he comes back, you are only in Joe Burrow's third game back. So is that going to be the old kind of plodding, we're struggling offense? Or should we expect, unrealistically, coming back from injury, that this is going to be that high octane, continued 30, 40 points per game scored team? I think that's highly unrealistic with Burrow coming back from injury. But just based on the ebbs and flows of this team, I don't know. I did mention the Bengals' next two games at the Steelers, home for the Patriots. Then, as I mentioned with the Ravens schedule, they go to the Ravens on the short week after hosting the Patriots. And then they go to Buffalo on December 7th. So you have to make the argument at 3-6 that in the next month of football, and I will reiterate this one more time, at the Steelers hosting the Patriots, who are 7-2, 8-2 at this point right now, go to the Ravens on Thanksgiving, and then you go to Buffalo a week and a half later. You have to make the argument that the Bengals need to be 3-1 or 4-0 in that stretch to be in the picture. You have to be 6-7 at a minimum. Where are you getting those three wins? You have to me, the musts are the division. You have to get 2 wins. You have to beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh, and you have to beat the Ravens in Baltimore. Must. And then you got to take one from one of 2 pretty dang good AFC East teams right now. The Patriots at home or the Bills on the road. And you can go back to history and say the Bengals have played well against the Bills. Yeah. The Bengals have played well against Mike Vrabel and his teams. Yeah. It is what it is. I mean, I don't know if that plays into this or not. Those are different teams, different defensive coordinator, different offensive coordinators in some respects. That if you go back to that, but they absolutely need to go 3-1 or 4-0 over this next month to keep pace with everybody, I think.
It's just I feel like just repeating what Burrow said is just the wise thing to do here. It's just about just seeing how things go and feeling things out, because this team feels as much similar as they feel to last year. It feels like a completely different vibe in terms of them being able to run the table that they need to, just because of the nature of their schedule and the fact that I think we all are kind of realizing that if Burrow does come back, how quickly can he play like himself? If the guy can't even play like himself in the first 2 weeks of a regular season, which he has a full off season, right? Like that's just another variable that you have to consider, and that they should probably consider too, but they're not going to consider, because if Burrow is healthy enough to play, then the starting quarterback who's getting paid $50 million a year is probably going to play. But is that the smart decision? I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see.
And the Bengals are facing a good problem in the fact that the guy who is replacing him is playing lights out. So, yeah. I mean, there is a good problem there, even though the wins don't show it. But as we promised, we have crammed in a boatload of stuff in an hour. Let us drop the mic and get out of here. This has been a slammed week of Bengals news. It's Steelers week. The Bengals have a big one in front of them, and like you said, John, it's what's in front of them, and my lights went out on me here. So
turn out the lights. The party's over.
Yeah, my Christmas lights must have been turned on, and that's why this one clicked out. I don't know, but now I'm in the dark. They got mad at me the lights got mad at me for doubting the Bengals can go 3-1 or 4-0.
I guess I'll drop the mic here with a little bit of news. The Bengals signed Brian Asamoah II to the active roster from the practice squad. And shout out to him, because he made his debut against the Bears, and he had a pretty crucial block in Charlie Jones's kickoff return to a touchdown. So that is just a great story for a guy who just made the practice squad and was elevated because Logan Wilson was traded to the Cowboys, and then immediately made a play, and now he's got a little bit more of a contractual security. So a nice little story in this crazy wild season for Brian Asamoah.
And the guy that they brought in, I know our buddy Joe Goodberry was kind of high on him. Do you know much about him?
I don't know his name off the top of my head. It's like a three name, but he's a rookie out of Virginia Tech, and he was really good at rushing the passer. The Eagles obviously can identify talent from a mile away, and they're just so stacked to the point where they just didn't need him on the practice squad, and they've been going in and out of guys on the practice squad. So good job with the Bengals of identifying a quality pass rusher, but even if he's just on the practice squad.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. I've got a little
Antoine
more light
Powell
now,
Ryland.
So,
I'm Dan the Man. Thank you, Dan.
There you go. Yes. Thank you. This is what happens when we kind of try and do stuff on the fly. Sometimes we just don't have. We need the guys to pass us the index cards of the info. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I'm just going to reiterate again. Happy Veterans Day to all of you, whether you're taking the day off or I don't know if you do have to work, that sort of thing. Some industries work, some industries don't. But regardless, you know, the things we get to do that a lot of people take for granted are because of the sacrifices of a lot of men and women in first responders and military and everything. And we appreciate you. I don't want to speak for you, John, but I'm pretty confident in that, especially since you've got some family with military backgrounds. I do as well. And so we appreciate you. Happy Veterans Day to everybody. And thank you for spending it with us, even though my lights went out on me a little bit premature here, but that's okay. We will be back with more probably late this week. I know my buddy John is a little out of action here later this week, but we'll have some more stuff for you on the Orange and Black Insider, definitely on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. Get that through your favorite audio streamer, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel if you could. Tell a friend. We appreciate it. And our thanks to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and the fans only company, Foco.com. Go to the links in our bio to not only place your bets through America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel, but also to get some exclusive Bengals merch through Foco. We appreciate all of you. Thank you for spending time with us and commiserating with us, maybe even getting a little bit of hope with us. I don't know. But John, I appreciate you, buddy. Thanks for coming on, and enjoy the rest of your week, man.
Peace.